Hi, I'm Daniel Kaplan. Today I want to talk about how to make your family celebrations unforgettable for celebrating the biblical holidays. This is something I'm really passionate about. I've been celebrating the holidays all of my life, and I'm always looking for ideas to make them engaging for families, for adults, for children, for everybody. Let's make these vibrant holidays that we're all excited to celebrate. So, you want to choose to celebrate God's holidays. Now what? This is kind of the question a lot of us get to, right? When we decide that we're going to go against the grain, we're going to celebrate those quirky holidays found in Leviticus 23, right? Or perhaps you've been celebrating them for a while, but you want to make them more vibrant. You want to make them more exciting. Like, what can you do to make these lasting memories for your family? And it's challenging. Why? Well, you can't just walk into Walmart and buy Pentecost decorations now, can you? It is tough, when it comes to things like Christmas or Easter. It's so easy to be able to go out and make elaborate displays and make them really fun and exciting and all these great traditions. And then you get to the Bible holidays, and they start to feel a little bland, a little simple, because we have to do a lot of things ourselves. But I'm going to go through a lot of different traditions, activities, things we can do to make them exciting. Now, there are three approaches when it comes to celebrating the holidays. There is what I call the Jewish approach, and this is where you borrow practices from Jewish culture who have been celebrating these holidays for thousands of years and have rich associations with them. So you kind of do it more or less like they do it. Then there's what I call the pious approach, and this is where people think biblical holidays should not resemble other holidays at all, and they should be stoic events, minimalist, to avoid breaking God's purpose for them. And I think both of these approaches do have some points to make, right? We certainly do not want to add practices that are man-made traditions that take away from the meaning. We also don't want to just, try to keep up with the Joneses in order to try to compete or something like that. However, these are holidays that are physical reminders for a reason. We are physical beings, and God does deal with us on our level, which is one reason why I like what's behind me, the integrated approach. The holidays are given to us for our benefit, and therefore we should do our best to make them meaningful for us individually. This includes making them fun, exciting, while maintaining their meaning and theological depth. So that's what I'm getting at. And you may find, as I go through some of my ideas, suggestions, whatever, you may think, well, Daniel, I just don't see that theological depth. And fair enough. If you don't, it doesn't apply to you, right? Maybe this is not a practice that would benefit your holiday celebration. Maybe it would actually distract. Fair enough. We can approach these holidays in different ways. As it says in Colossians 2:16, and this is a common verse that people use just to throw out the holidays altogether, right? But let's not only argue against that bad exegesis of this. Let's also argue for what is the correct exegesis of this, right? And that is when it says, let no one pass judgment with you in questions of food or drink or with regard to a festival or a new moon or a Sabbath. These are a shadow of things to come, but the substance belongs to Christ. When it says that, what it's getting at is, what is the purpose of these festivals? What is the purpose of these holidays? They are to point us to Christ, right? So if you can give somebody the answer, it's like, well, you may not like this tradition I do, but honestly, in my mind, it does point to Christ. Well, that is a good defense for coming up with a practice, right? And you should not let people put restrictions on you that do not exist in the Bible. The Bible does not have a lot of restrictions on how to celebrate the holidays. In fact, they are rather loose, partly because God did know these were holidays that were going to be celebrated for thousands of years in different climates, different cultures. People would want to express themselves differently, right? Now, R.C. Sproul has a great comment about dealing with personality differences. And this is what he says. The conscience is a delicate instrument that must be respected. One who seeks to influence the consciences of others carries a heavy responsibility to maintain the integrity of the other person's own personality as crafted by God. When we impose false guilt on others, we paralyze our neighbors, binding them in chains where God has left them free. When we urge false innocence, we contribute to their delinquency, exposing them to the judgment of God. So obviously, I want to do neither things today. I don't want to give you false guilt about ways that you should not celebrate the holidays, but I also am trying not to give you the sense of how to celebrate the holidays in an incorrect way and be too loose about them either. I'm hoping I'm finding a balance, but this is something I'm keeping in mind as I go through. And this is something you need to keep in mind as well. Your conscience does need to speak to you about the best way, the best methods, what's going to work for your family. All right, so when it comes to the elements of holiday celebrations, these are just the basic things that come to mind when you think of what makes a great memory. What's going to be a day that you're going to be like, wow, that was a great day. I remember that, or it's something I look forward to, right? Things like decorations. We love to put up displays that are beautiful and have artistry and remind us of things, right? We do this for weddings and all different kinds of things. Activities, games you play, or things that you do that remind you of different things. Food, of course. Food is always a part of holiday celebrations. Do you have a special menu item that you look forward to every year? And I'm sure a lot of you can immediately say, oh, yes, I do for maybe some of the holidays, but do you for all of them? And I'm going to give you some ideas of maybe some places you can go with some of them, because I do think that's a great idea. And then, of course, we have ceremony, right? We want to have a certain amount of ritual of things that we do on an annual basis to remind us of the principles of the holidays. Okay? Now, again, what I'm going to be proposing, I'm going to start with the Bible, which, like I said, does not give a lot of specific directions about the holidays. And then I'm going to give you a lot of suggestions. And please use the ones you like, throw out the ones you don't. I'm not going to be offended. I'm not going to visit your home. I'm not going to know. Now, when it comes to 7 holidays, it means thinking outside the box. Why? Well, you just don't have 7 garages, right? Your friends, your neighbors, they're celebrating Christmas, and what can they do at the end of December? Well, they can pile all those Christmas decorations and load up their garage, and that means they can really blitz their house with some really great stuff. Well, unfortunately, when you have 7 holidays, you can't do that because you don't have 7 garages. So what can we do in order to create some excitement around the holidays? Is it even possible? Well, we've got to think a little bit outside the box, like I said. Think about repurposing. Find items you can use for multiple events, right? Because then you can keep using it. Instead of 7 items, you just have 1 item. So things like chalkboards, easily erased and reused for all the holidays. And let's say you're not an artistic person, fair enough, just buy a projector. They're not that expensive. You can find ones for, $50, even $30 that will work well enough to give you something to trace with chalk, right? And you just find an image online, something, or a message. You just get a nice looking font, and then you can trace that, and you could do a scripture or something like that. Or, you can get a customizable letterboard and make different signs and things like that for the holidays. Another thing you could try are lamps. This is a lamp right there with a vellum sort of sheet in it. You can find DIY projects like this as well, with glass lamps, and then they put in a light bulb and things like that. Or you can just put in a glow stick if you want to go the cheap method, or a tea light, one of those little battery ones. And what you can do is you can print out transparencies, right? And then you can put the transparency to shade, and now you have a replaceable light fixture for every holiday. You can have little sheets that you put in for every one of the 7, and you can just switch it out seasonally, and it always reminds you of the holiday. What about picture frames? You could have a dedicated wall in your house that's like your seasonal display wall, and then, ever so often you just refresh it. So when it's almost time for Passover, you put in a lot of Passover oriented images, then you might switch it out for Pentecost, and you might switch it out for the fall, and things like that. And again, that's something you can constantly repurpose. Printable magnets work really well because they can be used to decorate other things like mirrors and refrigerators and whatnot, and then you can easily remove them for the holidays, and they store really well. Other things like fabric, right? Like pillowcases. I like this one. I like to think my bread misses me too. Great for unleavened bread, right? Curtain rods are great because you can put different curtains. You can print out your fabric. Nowadays, there's, Spoonflower and Zazzle and Cafe Press, and you can make different prints. Tablecloths, find different tablecloths that perhaps remind you of the different holidays. One thing you can do is you can use color. Assigning a specific color to each holiday season can help you transform your house without needing a lot of extra items, right? You can use different tablecloths, different table runners, different things, and you just change out the linens and things like that, and it can create quite an impact. Now, you might be like, well, what are the colors of the holidays? Do we even know? Well, I mean, There aren't any official colors, but you can do ones that make logical sense. Like, red for Passover certainly makes a lot of sense. It reminds you of, the blood of the sacrifice, things like that. I have blue for Pentecost. It's kind of like a robin eggshell blue. And I just think it kind of reminds me of the Holy Spirit. And, but, you might come up with something else. Yellow for trumpets makes sense. It's an alert color, right? It's what we use for caution signs. It's also a sign connected with trumpets. Day of Atonement, if you're going to do things, you would expect to be very somber and dark. You might even literally do something like sackcloth or something like that. Festival of Tabernacles, you might think of fall colors, harvest colors. And the 8th day of Sacred Assembly is associated with judgment. So royal colors, things to remind us of God's sovereignty, would make a lot of sense. Now, when it comes to holidays, one thing that people really relate to is music. And when you think of, the holidays they celebrate in the world, like Christmas, it's like, wow, the music is so impactful. If only we could have music like that. Well, it's a funny thing about the development of holiday music. Let's look at this list. Now, this is a list of songs that are for Christmas. You probably recognize these. And so it says, what do these songs have in common? You might think, well, these are all Christmas songs. But there's something else that I'm trying to identify with this list. Give up? Well, the answer is these are all songs that were not, in fact, written for Christmas. The tunes were written for something else, or the whole song was written for something else, and they have just been basically used for Christmas. What they did was they found beautiful melodies that already existed, and then they made the songs about Christmas. It's a pretty clever practice. Now, you might be like, well, why, Daniel, are you mentioning this? I mean, what does that have to do with the way that we should celebrate the Bible holidays? That's what they do. Well, you can make a biblical case that perhaps this is a practice that has been going on for quite some time. When you go to the Psalms, Psalm 9:1, this is the New King James translation. I know there's different interpretations of the way to do this, but this is a possibility, and this says, to the chief museum, this is the title of the psalm, to the tune of Death of the Psalm, a psalm of David. Now, when it says to the tune of, it's to the setting of, it's in the style. People are not entirely sure what that means, but it could, in fact, mean exactly what we see for Christmas, and that is that some of the psalms were literally written for tunes that already pre-existed. This was just such a common practice. A lot of hymns are like that. And it's something that I think that we need to think about when we think of, not in a competitive way, but we think of like, wow, Christmas has all this going for it and the holidays don't. And people wrote all this great stuff. It's like, well, did they, or did people take what was in their culture? So one thing I like to do is I literally do this. I do take songs from culture. I'll throw some of them in the mix here. This might be a fun practice for your family to do, because, if you're not musically talented, maybe you're lyrically talented and you could take a song from the world. Some groups you might have heard of, like the Maccabees and things like that, they tend to do it in a silly way. What I'm suggesting, and there's nothing wrong with that, but what I'm suggesting isn't a silly adaptation. When you think of the Christmas songs I mentioned back here, like "O Holy Night," nobody thinks of that as a silly parody of something, right? What they did was they just took a really beautiful song and they put other lyrics to it, right? And so that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about taking a song that's just very popular, it works, it's fun, and then just making it about something from the holiday, or about the holiday itself. All right, so let's dive into these spring holidays. We've got 3 of them: Passover, Days of Unleavened Bread, and the 7th day of Unleavened Bread. But it begins with the countdown to Passover. And here is where we can be a little clever. We can actually use the worldly culture around us to our advantage. Occasionally the world gets some things right. Now, the New Year, people, what people might call the pagan New Year, the Roman New Year, January 1st. It's actually a good time to begin your preparation for Passover. And the fact that so many people are making New Year's resolutions, well, you can kind of use that to your advantage and be like, yeah, that's right, we are approaching Passover. Why don't I kind of make a resolution, not a New Year's resolution, but a Passover resolution? Or, I mean, it's kind of a New Year's resolution for the ecclesiastical year, which starts in the spring, right? Because 30 days is the amount of time it says that psychologist says it takes for a habit to form. Okay, but 90 days is the amount of time that many psychologists say the habit gets cemented in the brain. Well, it's about 90 days or so from January 1st to Passover. Maybe a little bit longer, maybe a little bit less, but it's in the ballpark, right? So it does make sense to use this time frame to prepare yourself. And of course, this is what the Bible says as well. Examine yourselves to see whether you're in the faith, test yourselves, or did you not realize this about yourselves that Jesus Christ is in you, unless indeed you fail to meet the test? So let's reassess ourselves, right? That is the purpose of Passover time, is to let's take a moment and let's take stock. And this is something that we can do in all different aspects of our life. We can look at, health decisions are often connected to spiritual matters. Of course, spiritual matters like, are we letting certain sins slip by, things like that, things in our family, things in our marriage. We need to be the ambassadors for the way that God, for the way of God, for the, commandment keeping Christians. We need to be able to reflect that lifestyle and reflect the Bible, right? And so this is a good time for us to take stock and think about those things. Now, by the time you get to the first day, it says removing, we have removed leaven from our houses. And a lot of people, I think correctly, do still keep this practice and de-leaven their house. They clean their house and they remove bread items or leavening items, and different ways of categorizing that. Fair enough. But it's about trying to do this physical practice to remind us of the removal of sin. And you can certainly make this an enjoyable activity that involves the whole family. You can make it a little bit of a scavenger hunt. A common Jewish practice is to save a little leavening and then have a search for it, and then you get to destroy it in a fun way. And this is a way to engage the kids, but also teach them a very, very valuable life lesson, because you could say, you know what, you do have to search through your life to find some of the things, that are broken about yourself, or the bad ideas you get from the world. And then, you know what, you need to purge it. You need to get rid of it. You need to, purify yourself. And of course, a lot of children love setting things on fire. So having some sort of fun destruction of sin, you might think, well, isn't that trivializing? I don't think it does. I remember my dad doing this practice, and I found it very meaningful to know that there was going to be that destructive behavior was going to be met with destructive ends. Even though obviously setting things on fire is kind of fun as a 5-year-old kid, right? Now, you want to look around your house too when you're de-leavening. Think of the images you're surrounding at. What are you looking at daily? Are there some books in your bookshelf that maybe they shouldn't be so prominently displayed? Don't necessarily get rid of them, but should you look at them on a daily basis? Is that movie poster really giving you the right image? Don't just take this as just bread, right? Let's go deeper. Well, let's get into this, right? And let's look at our surroundings, and let's think about the messages you're sending to yourself. I'm not trying to get feng shui on you, but there's a certain reason why people have those sort of ideas. And it's because, yes, things around you do affect your mental state to some extent. Of course it does, right? You're just looking at it all the time. Now, when it comes to decorations for Passover, there are different approaches. A popular one that I see, which is a very beautiful tradition, is to take some sort of red cloth and hang it over your door frame, and, reminds you of the red over the doorpost. It's a very beautiful tradition. Another fun thing you can do, you can take all your action figures, for your Passover meal, and you can make it look at the crossing of the Red Sea, and you can get the kids involved, and they can have the little figures going across. That's lots of fun. And then the 10 plagues do make a great way to graphically illustrate the power of God. And of course, a lot of kids like a lot of the symbols of the plagues, like the frogs and the lion, and the wild beasts, and if you believe in the wild beasts. I actually believe they're swarms, but often people do wild beasts, and the cattle dying and the pestilence and stuff like that. It's the special effects part of the story, right? Another thing, though, is think about surrounding yourself with images of freedom. Now, one thing I found interesting when researching this project is look at the background of these images about freedom. What is the common thing we see? And that is a big expanse and water. And how did God free the Israelites? Through water. So you can see even secular artists, when they want to demonstrate visually what freedom looks like, they show you water. So it's really cool. You can find a lot of images that tie right into the story, narratively speaking, because it does just tie into the way we naturally think about it. All right. When it comes to activities for this time frame, here's something fun you could try. You may have heard of the elf on the shelf concept where they move the elf around and it's supposed to be spying on you. Kind of weird, but it's a fun thing for kids to look for, and they get so involved and they're like, oh, where's he going to be today? Well, what about this? This is a little plush you can get. I found one like this on Amazon, and I call him Mr. Puffed Up. And the idea is that he's this mischievous piece of bread, and every day he's doing something bad, because even though we've tried to get rid of all the leaven in the house, well, there's always going to be some sin, and unfortunately he keeps cropping up and he keeps making trouble. And it's a fun way, again, to teach your kids about that concept, right? We're not just having fun for the fun of it, although that's okay, but we're also using it to demonstrate that concept, and it's a great teaching tool. What about making an unleavened house? This is made with Nutella and nuts and things like that. Lots of fun. Read the Exodus story with your kids, find a themed movie to watch, lots of different versions of the Exodus story. It's a very popular one to tell. They don't always get all the details right, but then you can have a family discussion about that and talk about some of the differences between the Hollywood or the Christian adaptation and the way the story actually goes. Another popular custom is the search for unleavened bread, sometimes called the afikomen, and this is often done at Passover. You break a piece of the matzah and then you hide it, and the kids have to go look for it and they bring it back. And this is a great custom because it does make a great Christology point. It's a piece of bread and it gets broken in half, and it gets hidden and then it comes back. So it's a great way to teach about the death and resurrection of Christ with your children as well. And it's a fun activity. Kids love a scavenger hunt. All right, when it comes to food, this is a holiday where the Bible is explicit about food because it's the whole kind of point. It's unleavened bread, right? Unleavened bread and bitter herbs. Now, most people get the unleavened bread. They got that one, but sometimes they'll kind of skip out on the bitter herbs part, especially if you're not the kind of person that does a traditional Seder. And I don't recommend doing that. It does say so in the Bible, and I think there is a point. There is a point to having a physical reminder in your mouth that draws something. Now, what does that mean? Well, it doesn't specifically say what the bitter herb is. There's different people have different ideas. Do you want to make it kale? Do you want to make it horseradish? Do you want to make it arugula? What matters is more what teaches you the best lesson, right? What demonstrates to you the feeling of, the bitterness of slavery or something like that. Matzo ball soup's a popular item. This is charoset, which you might be familiar with if you do a Seder, which is to remind you of the bricks in the mortar that they used, the mortar they used to make bricks, although it's an apple-based recipe, so it's actually very delicious. But it is that visual reminder, kind of fun. But of course, having fun with matzah is what everyone loves to do. Unleavened bread, matzah lasagna, matzah granola, matzah chocolate toffee, matzah layer cake, matzah nachos, matzah salad. It's fun. You almost go out of your way to do things with bread you never would, just so you can throw matzah into things. At least that's how it is in my house. Now, when it comes to ceremony, the important thing is for it to be a Memorial Day, right? This is supposed to be a time that we remember the Exodus, our Exodus, the Israelites' Exodus, our freedom, right? And I love the tradition in the Seder to have this opening statement. Sometimes they make it into a question, but it is a direct translation of it, is a statement. How different is this night from all other nights, right? And this is what you want your audience to think if you're hosting an event, or what you want your family to think. You do want this night to stand out. So it's not just a formal meal where you get around. Like, it needs to feel different, and that might be different things to different people. But just think about that. Now, you can do a full-blown Seder. There's a lot of great traditions, or you can maybe pick specific things from it that you like. Some of the traditions associated, they have a moment of reflections regarding the 10 plagues and the Egyptian suffering. They dip this parsley in salt water to remind the tears and bitterness of slavery. They read relevant scriptures, and they open the door for the prophet to announce the return of the Messiah. These are all great customs that tie into the meaning of the day that you could do. And again, and if you do actually want to do a full Seder sort of ceremony, you can always message us here at Flair. We do have a ceremony that we do which does include a lot of Hebrew songs because that's our tradition. But you might find you like that connection with that culture, and fair enough. Lots of great history. All right, special songs to do. Psalm 114, of course, is a great psalm to sing at this time of year because it is about this. There's a beautiful setting by Stephen Pearson that you can find, and I'll put a link in the comments. You can find it. I don't think I can find a sung version of it, but he's a great composer. But it is very beautiful, and it's very straightforward. But there's other versions of Psalm 114 out there if you'd like to find a different one. Jason Silver has one as well. Go Down Moses is a popular spiritual. It's a nice song. Prince of Egypt soundtrack might be great to put in the background, but we can go a little bit further. So I was talking about changing melodies of, or not changing melodies, changing lyrics of songs with beautiful melodies. So one thing I did was I took the beautiful song You Raise Me Up and I made it about unleavened bread. Here's a little clip of it. You can find the full video on this channel.
Unleavened bread, the symbol of atonement. Unleavened bread, not puff up from within. We are free, 'cause He has passed us over, and with His blood He cleanses us from sin.
Like I said, you can see the full video if you just find it on this channel. Now, what about the first day of unleavened bread? We're past the Passover night, and we're moving to the first day. Well, the first day is, of course, the Exodus. We are leaving Egypt. So what are some of the things we can do? Well, what about a pillar of cloud? God did meet us in the pillar of cloud. Well, this is a fun craft project you can actually do yourself. It's a little DIY. You can find different YouTube tutorials for them. What people do is they take paper lanterns and they kind of cover them up with cotton balls and things like that, and then they hang some lights and it makes a really beautiful looking pillar of cloud, right? And of course we could get some of these light bulbs that make it look like a big flame and put it in a cylindrical lamp and give ourselves a pillar of fire as well, if you want to depict the night and the day, right? When it comes to food, pillar of cloud, cotton candy, right? Maybe something to remind you of the pillar of cloud, or mashed potatoes or something like that. Something maybe to remind you of the pillar of fire, like, peppers chopped up into columns of fire or things like that. Have some fun with your presentation. Ceremony. This is a good time to read Exodus 13, right? This is also a great time to read Song of Solomon. It is traditionally read on the Sabbath during unleavened bread. Now, this is something especially for couples. Now, we talked about at the New Year's resolution, again, the pagan New Year, right? 90 days before Passover, if you prefer that. When you're starting to take stock of yourself, one thing is you should take stock of your marriage and not just, whether or not you're on the same page or not arguing enough, but yeah, take stock of your intimacy, of your sex life, of how is it going, find out, because this is something that we do need to do maintenance of. And there's a reason why there's a whole book in the Bible about the beauty of, sexuality and marriage, when everybody, everybody being the two people involved are, really passionate for each other, and they are selfless and loving, and just how beautiful that can be when everything is working well. And often, we struggle a bit, and this is a good time of year to take stock. Let's go back. Let's recommit ourselves. Let's recommit ourselves to Christ. Let's recommit ourselves to each other, and find a way to rekindle that romance. Maybe you have people babysit your kids, or you come up with an exchange for the different couples. So during unleavened bread, everybody can watch the kids in different ways, and maybe you go off to a hotel room, maybe it's where you had your wedding night or something, and you figure out a way to kind of get that spark back. When it comes to the Puritans, people are like, well, isn't this a little bit overly physical or base? Well, the Puritans had a very good attitude about sexuality. A loving mutual affection must pass betwixt husband and wife, or else no duty will be performed. This is the ground of all the rest. They also said about marital love, it should be performed devotedly, kindly, and cheerfully. So, if the Puritans And then look at, the Orthodox Jews, which are also pretty pious in their attitude, can have such a positive attitude about it, and they can use the holidays in such ways. Well, why don't we try to do that? It would certainly create a better culture around us if we had more solid marriages, right? And you know what? You might have more children. I'm just saying. And that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. We could use some numbers. All right. On the seventh day is a holy convocation. And let's not forget that during this time frame between the first and the seventh day is when you have the resurrection of Jesus. This is something to think about and, have in your mind. And we, on the seventh day, have the commemoration of when the Israelites crossed the Red Sea. It's also the time frame when they entered into the promised land through the Jordan River, and you had the Battle of Jericho. It was around this time frame as well. Certainly seems so, because right after Passover, it seems like they immediately begin marching, more or less. So it's very close to this time frame. So when it comes to decorations, this is a good time to talk about the Jericho story. You can get some foam cord and a foam core, and then you can carve it out with tools. I've done this. It's not terribly difficult. You get shavers and drills with little special bits and things like that. You can find tutorials on how to do it, rock walls, and then you can paint them. And then you could do the red cord for Rahab and that beautiful promise given to her, which is a great way to remember that story. You can also commemorate the Red Sea, crossing the Red Sea. One thing I like to do is I have an entrance foyer and I have a hallway, and I like to make it seem like you're kind of crossing the Red Sea. So I have projectors and stuff and sounds of the ocean. And I love to make my guests feel like, oh, we're kind of crossing the Red Sea. It's very theatrical, and that's really fun. And it is such a powerful metaphor. Let's use those visual metaphors. They're in the Bible for a reason. When it comes to activities, play games, marching around Jericho, like a version of musical chairs where you're marching around and having fun. What about things like toppling over games? You building up stuff and you're knocking it over. Kids love that sort of stuff. Jenga, the walls of Jericho come toppling down. Finding the spies game. This is something I saw. You had the spies in cans and you whipped it up. Just ways to engage your children in the story. When it comes to food, well, we talked about unleavened bread houses, but you could make the walls of Jericho out of unleavened bread and have a nice visual display of that. You can also depict the Red Sea crossing with, ocean-themed stuff. So, blue drinks and water-looking items, ocean-looking items. Ocean-themed items is probably a better way of putting it. Or maybe you make the walls of Jericho out of Rice Krispie treats. When it comes to ceremony, this is a great time to read Exodus 14 and 15 as a family or in your congregation, or Joshua 2 through 6, the Jericho story, another great story to read as well. A great song for this time frame is My Soul Among Lions. They did a beautiful rendition of Exodus 15 that I think should be a huge hit among people who celebrate these holidays because it works so well. Let's take a little listen.
A people you have redeemed will honor you as king, for you have shown them your power to save.
Now, I will put in a plug for My Soul Among Lions in general. They do beautiful scriptural adaptations. So if you're looking for songs that are direct adaptation of scripture, My Soul Among Lions, top notch. Now, I, of course, have one as well, but I like to take ABBA's Dancing Queen, and I made my own little fun version.
Walk right through the sea, facing straight, turning tyranny. Through the sea, so they all could live eternally. Oh, yeah.
If you want to see the rest of that, you can, again, look at the channel and maybe you can have a fun little sing-along. All right, so let's move to the summertime, to the summer holidays and the days leading up to Pentecost. Remember, we are supposed to be counting towards Pentecost. Don't forget to count. Just because you have a calendar, somebody in your congregation has figured out when it's going to be and they've told you, just come on this day. No, count, count every single day. We're supposed to be doing that, right? And it's a lot of fun to count down to Pentecost. I love the Pentecost countdown.
It's the Pentecost. Pentecost countdown. The Pentecost countdown.
If you want that clip, just email me. But let's look at, what they do for Christmas. They have these advent calendars, right? Where do you think they got that idea? Counting down to a holiday. So why don't we kind of take back that tradition a little bit, right? Let's get it back to the Bible where it belongs. You can find advent calendars that have 25 days like I show here. Most of the time they're 24, but you can. But you can also make your own, and there are so many different ideas on how to make an advent calendar. And how about let's make these sort of calendars fun ways to count down towards Pentecost, because that's kind of what the Bible says to do. So why should we let them do it when we're commanded to do it, right? Let's us do it and have a good time doing it and engage our kids. Another thing you can do is you can buy your kids a watch, or maybe yourself a watch, a fancy watch, because again, it's about counting time and things like that. And then every time you look at that watch, you're like, oh yeah, this is what I got for Pentecost. It's a nice little tradition to do. The one thing about the commandment in Leviticus 23 is it doesn't say very much. It just says you should hold a holy convocation, you shouldn't work, but it does say you shall make a proclamation. It doesn't always say that. And I think one reason why is because Pentecost is about that commitment. It's about the giving of the law. It's when the covenant was really ratified and solidified. You had the initial, it's kind of like you're initially saved, right? And you believe in Jesus, and then you really commit to the lifestyle. You really dive in, and this is that day when it's like, yeah, I am all in. I am gonna, I'm going to walk in righteousness. So when it comes to decorations, well, Pentecost is the time that the 10 Commandments were given. So, of course, if you can find decorations that talk about the 10 Commandments, this is an applicable time to display them. Or if you don't have them, or if you want to make really big ones, let's say you want to make giant 10 Commandments, let's go for it, right? Well, get yourself some foam board and a projector, and you can do it. All you need is a steady hand and an X-Acto knife, and you can make yourself some big-looking sculptural 10 Commandments without a whole lot of, not a whole lot of effort. It might take some time, but it's certainly doable, right? And then they'll store pretty flat. And then you have them for every year, and you can cart them out, and you can put them on your wall, and you got these beautiful big 10 Commandments. Nice little artistic display, right? Another thing you might consider is doves for the Holy Spirit, because this is when, the power of the Holy Spirit arrived on Pentecost. And, dove is often associated with the Holy Spirit. It's a good symbol for that. Lots of different crafts for that, and things like that, confetti, whatnot. Some people don't like the iconography of a bird used for an image of God or something like that. If that's something you're not comfortable with, I respect that. But that's certainly a possibility. Pentecost is a holiday that is celebrated by some more mainstream groups. So you can look at some of their practices, like flames of fire. They often emphasize, look at this beautiful display. And this might be a little more masculine, a little more fun for the boys to see those flames of fire coming down than the doves. But, different strokes for different folks. And, you have these beautiful cascading images of fire and the power of the Holy Spirit, and, some beautiful ways of displaying it with these graphic images. Just get some inspiration from that. There's some different ways you can approach it. When it comes to activities, this is a good time to do 10 Commandments games, make sure, do little quizzes, do you know them? Give out prizes, give them candy if they can memorize all of them before Pentecost, right? Maybe they have 50 days, and by the 50th day, it's Pentecost, and they should know them all. And if they do, they get some fun prize. Try that. I like to do what I call tongues trivia, where I like to play different clips of the Bible in different languages, and you try to guess what it is to try to remember the speaking in tongues miracle. It's a lot of fun. And I often include ones like Klingon and Elvish stuff just to throw people off because I'm a nerd. Little flame of fire, halo thing. I think that's cute. Food. Now you might be thinking, what are you possibly going to do for Pentecost? Well, when we think about Pentecost, we think about the giving of the law, right? The 10 Commandments at Mount Sinai, and we think of the Holy Spirit, the great reminder of the law at Pentecost, right? In Acts 2. So when you think of the law, what does that have to do with food? Well, the Bible actually does give you a food metaphor for the law, which is milk and honey. It is compared to those things. It is sweet. It is milk because it is sustenance. And so this is something that you can keep in mind, which is one reason why Ice cream is a popular Jewish tradition, a dairy buffet, and who doesn't like a good ice cream buffet? And again, it reminds us of those days when we were living on the milk of the word and we were just getting started, right? Another way you could approach this, which is a little bit more to my speed, is fancy cheese. Yes. Pentecost was a holiday that I enjoyed, but I didn't enjoy on a more fun human level until I started making it a cheese buffet. And now it's one of my favorite holidays just for that memory. And I can remember cheeses that I tried for the first time at Pentecost. And you might be like, isn't that a little silly and shallow? But I don't think it is. I think these indelible memories connecting to God's commandments is a beautiful thing because, I don't just remember the beautiful cheese for the sake of the beautiful cheese. I also remember that it connected with the fact that the law is essentially like that. It is that place in my life. I have that much joy as I do for that really delicious cheese as I do for the law, right? And I can connect those ideas. And I also do it. I have signs around my buffet that connect the law to milk because there's scriptures available. And so you can, bring it all together. What about things that remind you of the dove? Possible. And of course, bread. Bread is a popular thing that's connected with Pentecost because of the wave sheaf and the harvest and whatnot. Okay, ceremony. This is a little bit like a wedding ceremony in some sense. You could say that, the Exodus story is when God, calls you, out of your life. It's like the bridegroom is kind of whisking away the bride from her family, and rescuing her. I mean, not most families aren't that bad, but, he's rescuing her from the family, taking her off. And this is really like that consummation of the marriage, that ultimate commitment to each other, right? So yeah, you can kind of make a wedding theme out of it and have toasts and cake, and you could even have like a birthday cake because it is the anniversary of the church in the Acts 2 or the church back in Mount Sinai, right? So you can say, it's whatever thousands of years old depending on what chronology you use, and that's a lot of fun. It's an anniversary party. Think of Acts 2 as the thing to read, Exodus 19 and 20, things that happen this time frame. And the book of Ruth is commonly read in synagogues around this time frame. It does tie in really well. It's a story about a Gentile coming into the covenant, which is exactly what happened at both Mount Sinai. There was a mixed multitude, and in Acts 2, Gentiles did, and they had to commit themselves. So that's a beautiful story. It's kind of set around this time frame. It does work really well. And you'll notice it is nice that some of these traditions does give you a feminine attribute, right? It's nice to have feminine heroes included in these stories. Of course, there are special songs you can sing for Pentecost. You can find Pentecost songs. There's not as many as I would like, but they do exist. You can go hunting for them. I've invented a few, and I'll be posting them to this channel as we get closer to Pentecost. I have one to Jailhouse Rock, and one to Michael Jackson's Beat It, and one to Happy by, I think it's Laurel Wilson, I think his name is. I'm not sure. I might get that wrong. But yeah, I have done those songs, and so keep tuned into this channel and you'll hear some of those fun Pentecost songs. But I'd love to hear some of yours as well. Ten Commandment songs. You can find Ten Commandment songs out there. Sunday school songs, things like that to help kids learn the Ten Commandments. All right, let's move on to the fall festivals. Fall festival is the Feast of Tabernacles, the Day of Atonement, the Feast of Trumpets, the Day of Atonement, the Feast of Tabernacles, and the eighth day of Sacred Assembly. Let's take a look at these holidays and what we should do about them. So, of course, we have the Feast of Trumpets, or the Day of Trumpets. Some people prefer the Day of Shouting. It's not exact translation. You shall observe a day of solemn rest, a memorial to proclaim with the blast of trumpets, a holy convocation. It's a little bit of a tricky holiday because it says a memorial, but it doesn't exactly tell us a memorial of what. However, there's different ways to speculate, and certainly thematically, we can figure out what trumpets are supposed to do, which is they are a reminder in of themselves. The Bible constantly uses trumpets as a way to wake us up, to get us spiritually alert. So this is kind of like in the marriage, right? If we want to take the marriage analogy, we were whisked away by the bride or by the groom, and we, had our honeymoon at Pentecost, and now we got to stay alert. We can't just let the relationship slip by, right? We've got to keep that maintenance. Now, when it comes to decorations, Of course, the shofar is a popular way to go because it is the traditional ram's horn that was used. And it's also a very simple shape to replicate. You can do it all different kinds of crafty ways, paper cutouts. You can, use a projector and you can draw all kinds of motifs. You can have lots of fun with shofars. But let's not forget, there are other types of trumpets. There were silver trumpets back in the day, which were similar to the modern concert trumpet. And certainly gives you the same sort of feel. And you can find, concert trumpet uh, things to decorate with. And I think that's perfectly appropriate. It still gets the point across. It's a blaring instrument, it's a loud instrument. I think it works very well. Alarm clocks, though, right? This might seem a little abstract, but yes, this is a holiday about being spiritually alert. So, think of things like that, or maybe caution signs or something like, something to, kind of shake things up, be a little obnoxious, get those neon colors out, perhaps, and maybe do glow in the dark stuff or something, something to just be like, whoa, because that's the idea. That is what this holiday is about. Another thing that this holiday connects to is creation. A lot of people connected to creation because it is the beginning of the calendar. The there's really two different New Years. It's kind of confusing, but there's an ecclesiastical New Year on the Jewish calendar, and then there's basically like a fiscal New Year, and that's more or less when Trumpets is, and so people connect it to creation because it's kind of the beginning of the year, right? I know that's a little controversial for some people, but one way you can connect, if you don't like that explanation, you can connect it to the creation account through what's written about in Job, where it says when the world was created, the angelic realm was shouting and making a lot of noise, right? And so, again, when you think of a holiday about shouting and making a lot of noise, that was a time in history when that was done. And it certainly connects with the end time in Revelation with the eschatology, where however you interpret that, it does connect with the trumpets leading up to the return of Jesus Christ. So it does connect with both the beginning of the story and the end of the story. A little alpha and omega going on, right? Now, when it comes to activities, it does tell you to blow trumpets, so blow them, find things. A lot of people can't just blow a regular shofar, it takes a lot of effort, or a trumpet, but you can find things like party horns or ones like that, and make a lot of noise. I mean, who doesn't like to make a lot of noise, especially kids? This is a time you can be loud and obnoxious. You can literally tell them, hey, you are commanded to be noisy today. How fun is that, right? And you can have so much fun with games and music and just loud activities because, again, it's about being spiritually alert. Play the drums, when it comes to music at your home or maybe at your church, think of, that loud, obnoxious stuff that maybe you're not sure about in terms of what to do religiously. Well, this is a good time. Throw it in there. Have some, shake it up. Make it different. Make this feel like a different service than normal. Make it more loud and obnoxious. It would work out perfectly. And there's probably people in your fellowship that would appreciate that kind of music once in a while. It may not be to everybody's taste. So you may not have to, they can't do it all the time. But yeah, that's the time frame for it. It's supposed to be this whoa moment, right? All right, when it comes to food, well, what kind of food has to do with trumpets? How about bugles? Okay, maybe a little cheesy, but they do look a little bit like a shofar. They work pretty well. Or you can make horn-shaped pastries, things like that, out of phyllo dough or those Pillsbury dough, things like that. You can make little cornucopia type things, trumpet pasta, why not, again, maybe a little silly, but, it ties all together. Now, here's a crazy project that you might want to tackle, but it's a lot of fun. What about the days in creation in food? Yes, I've actually done this because I'm that kind of person. So, you have the light. Well, you could do like clear jello with a glowing orb in it or something like that to indicate what is light. I guess you could have like light punch if you want to be cute. The clouds, you can do like mashed potatoes, the plants, you can have salad, the stars. I have star fruit here, birds, you have chicken, and for the people, little, uh, crackers that are shaped like people. And then for the Sabbath, I have the challah, which is the traditional Sabbath bread. But, you know, I suppose you could also just have nothing, and you could be like, well, I rested for the Sabbath. Those are your choices. But yeah, no, again, it's fun to tell stories in food. And this is something that God himself did, right? What do you think the ceremony that Jesus did right before he died was? That was storytelling in food. He was literally saying, this is my body, and and the symbolism of it. So, we can employ those same sort of tactics because it works. It does give you that indelible memory, and that's what we're looking for, especially because scent, don't forget, scent is such a powerful memory. It's one of the strongest sentimental, right? Not, no pun intended, but it's so connected with memory that you can have a scent and you're like, oh, and so much floods back to you. And try to think about that. What is the scent for all your holidays? Well, for trumpets, maybe it's coffee, right? Coffee is something we associate with alertness. So this is a great time, if you're a coffee aficionado, to kind of go all out. Get some fancy coffee or make some fancy, coffee tastings for people or something like that. It's quite a trendy thing to do these days, is to really go, uh, I'm trying to think of a good word, go kind of the equivalent of a wine fan, wine aficionado. And I don't know what the coffee equivalent is, but to go really intense into your love of that. Sure, this is a great time, and then you always have it to look forward to. And again, it does point to that theological point, which is about alertness. When it comes to ceremony, yeah, you could read that passage of Job 38 that I was talking about all the angels yelling and whatnot when the earth was created. You can read Genesis 1, the creation account. You can read Genesis 22, where Abraham is asked to sacrifice Isaac because he's replaced with what? A ram, right? And we blow the ram's horn. So, it ties in. Revelation about the trumpets, of course, makes a lot of sense. Now, when it comes to music, well, what about big band music? And of course, I had to do a big band song. The trumpet is a wake call, a blaring blast. To warn of his arrival, he is coming fast. It's a reminder every year that we should all watch and pray until Messiah appears. So let's celebrate this special holiday. It's the festival, the trumpets blow the trumpet today. And yes, I know I'm not a great singer, but if you are a great singer, I would love to get a better recording of this song. So please, message me, comment below. Now, next holiday is the Day of Atonement. This is a sober time, right? We are supposed to afflict ourselves, and it deals with, the two goats. And the Jews often associate this story with the story of Jonah, which is such a beautiful story of repentance. And it's about going down to that deepest place. Literally, he goes down deep, right? That deepest place, and having to, beg God for forgiveness and kind of go through the ringer and be afflicted in order to be humble enough to really understand the gravity of what we're doing. And of course, God's forgiveness of that, And so Jonah is a great story, perhaps, to talk about those sort of things with your kids. It's a beautiful narrative for that. It works, of course, for adults, but one wonderful thing about the narratives of the Bible is it does allow us to talk to children about things that would be a little more complicated to otherwise. All right, when it comes to decorations, you might be thinking, well, this is not really the time for decorations. And I agree with you. This is a more sober time. So I wouldn't really go, this doesn't seem like a time to make things overly pretty or whatever, but there might be ways to somberly do things, similar to how people might do a memorial or things like that. And this is where, you can use your creativity and do things that you think are applicable. But just kind of think about that. What are ways that you can kind of put yourself in that somber frame of mind? When it comes to activities, asking for forgiveness, it seems kind of obvious, but this is a wonderful tradition that the Jews do at this time of year, is they ask each other for the forgiveness for the things that they've done throughout the year. This is something you could perhaps formalize in your family, formalize with your friends, with your congregation, something you can do with each other. It's a wonderful practice. When it comes to food, you might be thinking, wait a minute, this is a fast day. What are you talking about, food? Well, I do agree with the interpretation that afflicting your souls refers to fasting, or certainly, even if you don't want to be, strict that that's the only interpretation, it is a good one. And I think fasting is a good thing to do, right? But even though you're fasting, keep in mind that on both ends of the fast, you are eating, right? You're going to have your last meal before the fast, and you're going to break the fast. Now, you might decide that there is room there to do something symbolic one way or the other. I personally don't. I've never done this, but I'm just throwing it out there because I imagine for some people, this might be something that they should consider because they might find that it'll give the day more oomph, if they think about it. If they think, oh, well, my last meal before I get in the somber frame should be this, and the first meal should be this. It's think about it. Maybe it'll be something that you will find helpful for you. When it comes to ceremony, yes, read Leviticus 16. Yes, read Jonah. There's a beautiful Jonah 2 song, which goes through the prayer of Jonah in the whale, written by Jason Silver. I'll put a link here in this in the comments below, so look for that. All right, when it comes to the Festival of Tabernacles, this is the Feast of Booths, right? And it asks us to build temporary dwellings and all of that with the fruits and the leaves and all of this. So God is okay with using foliage in holiday celebrations. Don't be paranoid about using flowers and plants and things like that, because this is something he asked them to do. Yes, to create a booth. It had a purpose, but he's not uptight about including nature displays as part of a holiday necessarily on the face of it. That's all I'm going to say. Now, when it comes to decorations, well, nowadays a lot of people will either go camping, or they'll go to maybe a hotel. It kind of depends on the social background, the cultural background you came from. And I'm not criticizing either of those practices. I think a temporary dwelling can be anything. And I think the point is for us to physically travel, be out of our home, something a little bit different. However, even that being said, I do recommend somehow you include a booth as part of your celebration. So let's say you're all going to meet at a hotel in kind of a conference style. I recommend decorating with a booth in that conference. It does feel strange to go to a festival booth conference and there is never a booth displayed, right? Just like you could go to a festival of wine and it could be at a hotel, but they'll actually have wine, right? So you would expect that there would be a booth somewhere just so we can commemorate the point of this holiday, right? And if you're the kind of people that go out in tents and things like that, you still may want to have not just the modern tent, but you may want to have something that is a little bit more reminiscent of the more traditional style booth. Perhaps you could think about that. Or you could even include, if you don't want to do a full-on display, maybe smaller models or things like that, or in the decorations around and things like that. And again, we have those leafy trees, those leafy branches, things like that. Consider including that as part of your display because it is mentioned. So I wouldn't just, disregard it. Even though it was building materials, still mentioned. And of course, things to remind us of the wilderness experience itself. This was a time they were dwelling in the wilderness. So images that remind us of that. Now, when it comes to activities, again, it's very popular to travel at this time. This has become kind of a big vacation time for people that are commandment keeping, and I think that's a great idea. I think it's a wonderful thing to connect things like traveling to fun places or meeting with a whole lot of people and friends and games with a holiday. I think it's great. I think this is one of the holidays that tends to be one of the most effectively, utilized within the commandment keeping community. And often they have, really great lectures and teachings and whatnot, and people learn a lot during this time frame. When it comes to food, one thing that you might recommend, again, this is usually often done in an event, but think about this as this harvest, this abundance. This is the theme that's getting across. One thing that is done is stuffed things, stuffed peppers and stuffed, cheese stuffed things, because again, that gives you that sense of abundance, right? And that's what this holiday is about. Ceremony-wise, Ecclesiastes is read in the synagogues during this holiday. Why? Well, again, this is a holiday about abundance, and if you're having a lot of abundance, one thing you might want to do is have a more sober-minded read about what does abundance actually do for us, which ultimately it's all vanity, right? It's only going to do so much for us in a physical way. So Ecclesiastes does kind of, you could say, kind of puts a damper on things, but it does put it into perspective, right? That ultimately this temporary life is temporary, and the whole thing about tabernacles is temporary. It's about, God's temporary dwellings with us. It's about us living in this temporary dwelling of a body. It's about, the world itself is temporary. It's just about things being temporary. So it works really well, and it does put everything into perspective. Not to mention, by the time you're a little bit into to the festival, yeah, you have had these big feasts and stuff like that, and you start to think, yeah, life does have more to offer, doesn't it? And of course we do know that, but it's helpful to hear those verses that remind us of that. Now, I'm going to put in a plug for my song, 7 Days, which you probably have never heard of, but If I Had My Way would be a big hit, of course. Just because I think we don't have enough festival songs. This was an original composition. I'll do my best to sing it. But again, I'm not a very good singer. If you're a better singer, please comment below, because I would love to have a better person sing this song. Celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles, where we commemorate when we'll be free from our lives' old shackles. When at last God's kingdom will appear, and the whole world is removed from fear, He'll dwell with us, He'll wipe away each tear. And for 7 days it's as if it's here. Anyway, for Miles Berry, I like the song. When it comes to decorations for the 8th day, well, the 8th day is associated with judgment, right? This is kind of the end of the whole story. If the holy days, the holidays are about God's plan of salvation, well, we started Him with whisking us away as His bride. We got married. We were alert. We sobered up to get better. And then we had our life. And then it's over. And now this is the afterlife. This is the judgment time, right? It all comes together full circle. So yes, the great white throne, God as judge, the ultimate perfect judge. And so that is the kind of imagery that you would want to have for decoration. Now, granted, again, second commandment keeping in mind, you got to be careful about what you're depicting and how you're doing it. However, we can use iconography about justice, right? Gavels and scales of justice and things like that. Because remember, God is the ultimate judge, right? And He will judge perfectly. And isn't that a wonderful thing to remember? And of course, the royalty, right? So this is a great time to have, the purple and the gold and those royal colors. When it comes to food, again, you can think about what people might do for like a lawyer party, right? What might remind you of justice? This is a little bit silly, but the sort of thinking, or maybe a royal banquet of some sort. Now, this brings the holidays to a close. We've gone through the whole calendar. And no, I did not cover, Hanukkah or Purim. I don't have an issue with those holidays. I do celebrate them myself because I do come from a Jewish background. But I was specifically talking about the Bible holidays. If you'd like, you can comment below. I can do some videos about, proper ways or ways to celebrate those holidays. There's a lot of traditions associated with them already, of course, and I would be happy to do so. But otherwise, I hope that this spawns creativity in your household, and I would love to see some of the ideas you come up with, and you can comment below, and you can let me know all about them, because as you can tell, I'm passionate about this. I decided a few years ago, because I was starting to have children, that I wanted to create those beautiful memories for my children, so that if somebody were to come to them and they were like, you really don't need to worry about those holidays, that even if they're like, well, you could maybe make the biblical argument, I just don't want to not do them because they're so great, they're so fun. Similar to how people celebrate Christmas, even if they don't even believe in Christ. There's a reason why tradition tends to outlast belief, right? And if we can create some really powerful, indelible traditions that teach lessons that have that theological underpinning, I think we can make a vibrant culture that will just be so impactful on the next generation. And this is why I'm so excited. So I hope you're excited too, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and I will see you around. Please subscribe, like, hit the bell to this channel for more commandment keeping content.